I was just reminded of something the other day and it kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable. So I was going through some Facebook memories like I tend to do when I need to feel sad or happy about something, just like everybody else. And I was kindly reminded that I started filming my first feature film, Cashing Out, 7 friggin' years ago. We started filming back in February. We started February 24th of 2017. And I can't believe that it's almost been 10 years now. A lot of things have definitely made me feel old over the years, but that is definitely like a big reality check for me that happened almost 10 years ago. I've been talking to other filmmakers and artists about their careers and all that, and I realized I haven't really talked about my own in, any of my recent videos. So I thought maybe that'd be worth, sharing that story, since a lot of you are new to my channel and you might be wondering if you watched any of my Amazon tutorials or any of my Filmhub tutorials or anything like that, like what's been my experience. Because for those who don't know, I've made a 2-hour feature length film and I've released it out into the world. So I thought maybe I would go back from the beginning, not only when I started, but just how I made a film in general, because I just had like an enormous cast and crew that helped me out with it. We shot it over a period of 3 months. I believe it was a little over 3 months. It was kind of crazy that we were able to put this entire thing together. And I shot the entire movie for under $15,000. And more significantly, I've made a pretty big portion of that back through my efforts through self-distribution, which is why I feel so confident when I'm talking about Amazon and Filmhub and all those other methods, just because I'm in the weeds of it literally as I speak. So let's go back to the very beginning for a little bit, because a lot of people come to me and ask me for advice about making their first feature films and all this, and they want to know like what should I do? And my first response is usually like, unless you've like made short films or anything like that, you probably shouldn't just be jumping into feature films. Back when I really decided that I wanted to try to make this as a career, that's kind of where I started. I actually tried to make a feature film when I was 20 years old. So I'm 33 right now. So 13 years ago, I tried to make my first feature film. It was a found footage horror movie. I won't really get into that too much, but I tried to have a lot of my friends help me shoot it. That worked for about 2 days, I think. And then everybody just kind of gave up. So that project is long in the dust. Kind of thinking about maybe trying to get the gears turning again on that one at some point, but probably not any time in the future, just because I think my next movie, I really think I want to do a found footage movie, and I'll tell you why here later. But anyway, I tried to make a feature film, didn't really work out, and I didn't really make a lot until I think my junior year of college. So I had met a bunch of people in my college experience who were kind of like me. I didn't really go to a film school, but I do have a radio and television degree in communications, and I met a lot of people who were like me because I live near Chicago. So like we have a lot of film schools like Columbia and Tribeca and the Art Institute and a whole bunch of others that I can't think about right now that I had thought about going to at one point or another. So I met a lot of people who were like-minded like me and just ended up at the school that we were at because that's all they could afford, and this was the closest degree that they could get. So of course we all coagulated and we did stuff like the 48-hour film project. Like in 2012, I did my first 48-hour film. That was a lot of fun. And I continued to do those, I think 6 more times after that. So I had a lot of experience just working on my own projects, getting people together, learning how to shoot and all that, and just getting, a crew and cast that I liked working with and could rely on for the most part. Not only that, as I worked on a lot of other people's films. Like I met people in college, or I met people through networking and all that. And they were kind of like me, doing these low budget feature films or short films, or, it wasn't even just that. It could have just been like a music video or just some sort of corporate video or something like that. If somebody was shooting it in the area, I tried my best to get in there. That was really important to me. So I continued to do that for years and years at a time. I was making my own like little short videos and stuff like that here and there, because sometimes it was tough to get people together So I just tried to think of all these random ideas here and there that I could just shoot on my own whenever I had time. Or even sometimes I would just set up shots on my own and do all the acting and all that. That was really tough, but that's how you learn. You got to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, and all of that. And I just kept doing that over and over again, and then as well as doing other people's projects. So I don't want to just credit doing short films as giving me enough confidence to make a feature film. I had actually worked with a colleague of mine on his thesis film, which was a feature film. I was the production manager on that, but really I was just kind of doing whatever. And, I learned a lot through that. And then he asked me back to do the cinematography and the edit. I edited that first feature film too, but he asked me back on his second film. He wanted to make another, and then he asked me to do the cinematography and the editing on that as well. And I learned even more in that project. So basically, like I was saying, I was just getting on everything that I possibly could because I just wanted to soak in as much knowledge and just learn from my own mistakes and the mistakes of others. So like I said, between age 20 to about 26, that's pretty much all I was doing. But in my senior year of college, I took a course where I forget exactly the wording of what the course was, but I was the only student that was in this course. And basically it was to write a script. I just went to a professor, my script writing professor, and I was like, hey, I want to make this like a focused course where I just write a script for a semester and that's all I do, because that was something that they offered. And she was on board with that. She's like, come up with an idea, yada, yada. And then you can do, all these different steps. Like, I think I wrote like a treatment. I did like note cards, just like all the steps of the script writing process. And then I ended up writing a short script. I didn't want to jump right into a feature right away just because I didn't really think I had the experience for that yet. So I'm like, I'm going to write, it's going to be a long short. I think the whole thing ended up being like 35 pages. Something like that, somewhere between 30 and 35. And that was going to be like my thesis, essentially, was this script. And I got a really good grade on it. I ended up winning an award for it. So that gave me a lot of confidence to try and do something else with it. So I'm like, okay, after college, which was, I graduated late 2013 into 2014. I'm like, I'm going to turn this into a feature film. But that took a couple of years. So, I think I started it probably in 2013 or so, because I finished the course in the spring of 2013. And then after that, I'm like, I just need to get into writing the feature length version of this script. So that's exactly what I did. And I kind of got discouraged here and there. I was like, I can't find the right idea, yada, yada. But I knew something was there. But I think I took a break at some point and I had something happen to me that kind of like turned everything around. I'm like, okay, if this is like legit, then I guess I need to try to make something out of this. So what was that thing? I randomly got an email one day. Somebody had read my script. I don't know how they got a hold of the script. Like I said, I won an award for that script. So I don't know if they got that script through the pipeline and they were looking for scripts. I think it was like some small college and they were looking for smaller projects that they would be able to shoot. And they offered me, they wanted the rights to the script in order to make it. And I had highly considered giving them the rights to it. Like, I consulted with my professor, some friends, some colleagues, etc. And then I started to think about it and I'm like, well, if these people are approaching me, then I probably have something here. Why do I want to give that away? Like, I'm very, my professor referred to me once as having the artist or the soul of an artist. And like, I'm very like big on owning my own work and, you know, all that. Like, that's why I'm making YouTube videos and not off making films for Hollywood right now, or at least trying to go down that path. It's just because this is the route that I personally wanted to take. So, I mean, it was, you know, I was thinking about it with, you know, this offer that they made me. And I'm like, I should just go do this on my own. Why am I not doing this on my own? So I'm like, I told them no. Ultimately, I told them no. And then I'm like, I got to get back to the writing room. So eventually, like, I sat there and thought about it. And then I finally came up with an angle that I enjoyed. It was from a friend of mine, or a couple friends of mine who I used to work with. and they kind of gave me this idea. They said something about, if we were going to rob a bank, we'd want you on the team, which I was very flattered and confused because I feel like I wouldn't be very good on a team for something like that, but apparently they thought I would. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd be very good at robbing banks, but I'm like, maybe I'd be good at robbing like poker games, like home poker games that people just kind of hold at their houses. So that's when the idea kind of clicked for me, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to explore this a little bit. Let's come up with an idea for this. And that was around like 2015 into 2016, and I just kept like fleshing this idea out. And one of the friends that I had spoke of, she kind of helped me like, flesh out the script a lot and all that. I'm like, I'm going to run wild with this idea. And then I ended up coming up with the script for Cashing Out, which is my feature film. So now I'm like, okay, now we got to figure out how to like actually make this happen, because this was a very ambitious project for me. I'd been making short films for a couple of years and made a couple of feature films. I'm like, you know what? If I can make the movie exactly like I've been making all these, it's basically just a short film, just over multiple days instead of just one. Because I was usually used to shooting one-day shoots, but like on my other friends' feature films, I was doing a lot of planning and stuff like that, or just watching him plan and all that. So I'm like, okay, I realistically know what I can do and how many days it's going to take me. So can I get all the pieces together to make this happen? So I wrote the script around people that I knew I could get. For one, people who had worked with me for a long time. So like Michaela, who plays Jackie, I'd worked with her for years. So I'm like, you're definitely going to be in this. I'd met my lead actor later. So he was a newcomer. He was somebody I knew I had to find. And a lot of the other actors I had to find too. But most of the people, at least on the crew side, and a lot of them on the cast side, they were already in my inner circle. So that's why I'm talking about like or at least when I was talking about earlier, where I'm like, you got to make a lot of stuff because you need to build that network. You can't just go, decide you're going to be a filmmaker, make a feature film. I guess you can do that. A lot of people do that. But if you want to take it seriously and not screw it up, that's exactly why you want to take those steps and just, kind of progress up to it. And it makes sense. I mean, like most people, they don't start making Marvel movies or these big movies. They make a couple smaller projects and they work their way up. Christopher Nolan, a great example. He made a lot of indie movies and now he's worked his way up to making these gigantic blockbusters and has figured out how to make character studies like Oppenheimer, box office successes. So, I mean, like that's what I'm talking about. I wanted to have a foundation to build on, because that's really important to me, because I'm sure most of you have noticed, if you're giant film nerds like me, like you can tell the difference between somebody who's just kind of gets whatever they want because they got the money, and people who actually want to take, have that foundation and build up from there. Like it's a night and day difference for sure. So that's what I wanted to do. So like I said, I gathered as many cast and crew that I had worked with on my other films. And then I gathered everybody else who I needed, for the pieces that I didn't have. And then I worked with a lot of locations that I already had. Like most of my locations I already shot at one point or another. So like my parents' house, I had a friend whose house I shot at, another friend's house who I shot at. My fiance's dad offered up his house for the majority of the movie. So there was just like a lot of smaller locations that I, just had to piece together here and there that weren't terribly difficult to do, just because I already had those relationships. I had already shot at these places before. So, I mean, it's just like, just another day on set for most of these places. Whereas, if I was just starting out, I wouldn't have all that. So the end of 2016 pretty much had everything planned out, had most of the actors and all that. And I was able to kind of fill in the gaps as we got closer to shooting. I think I had almost everything done by February of 2017. I want to say around there I had most of it, just to get going. So then we started shooting, like I said, February 24th of 2017. I remember that day vividly because that was the day that Get Out came out in theaters. So, I mean, it was pretty easy, mile marker for me to remember, just because obviously that was a pretty big movie to come out. But we started shooting. I think we did 1 day of shooting and then we took like a 2 week break. So shooting officially started like beginning of March. So around this time, I think actually next weekend, I'm shooting this on March 2nd. So I think next weekend is actually the technical weekend I would have started shooting this thing. But I mean, we shot like every weekend. So Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays, shot a lot of weekdays. I was working at the movie theater. So, I did a lot of overnights there just because I had a bunch of scenes that I utilized that location for. But mostly sticking to the weekends because that's, most of my crew worked 9-to-5 jobs, and a lot of the locations, the people work 9 to 5. So they're like, you can have it on the weekend. So I'm like, okay, just got to make this work. So there was a lot of times where I would shoot during the day and then I have to go work like 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. just, to make sure that we were able to complete a shooting day. And I did that pretty much for 3 months straight, which was really exhausting. So started beginning of March and then we ended in June. So, I mean, I don't want to go through all the details there as far as like, the specifics, but, that's kind of the TLDR version of all that. I'm happy to make another video about that if that is something you all want to see and hear about. But, I mean, everything was pretty smooth for the most part. There were some hiccups here and there, but, I mean, for the most part, everything went really smooth. So something I forgot to talk about in the beginning is, like, how did I come up with the money? How did I, did I have investors and all that? I recently interviewed John Iceberg, who directed the horror movie Final Summer, and that's something that we talked about a lot as far as fundraising and getting investors and all that. And I didn't do any of that. I'm like, I'm just going to pay for this thing out of pocket because I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I'm just going to shoot this thing as cheaply as possible. I'm just going to pay for things as I need it. So there wasn't really a budget for the movie per se. I ended up spending about $15,000. It's a little bit less than that now, but I ended up spending about $15,000 out of pocket for my movie. So how does that break down exactly? I spent about $6,000 on production. Most of that was for food for the cast and crew, props, all that. Like I bought a brand new poker table to use for the movie and I still have it to this day. Just like a lot of the little props. I want to say I spent like maybe under $1,000 on props. Didn't have to spend a lot. One of my locations costed a lot because I had to rent out a hall. So if you've seen the movie, if you've seen the dance scene, I actually had to pay for that. I think that was like $1,000 or something like that. I paid for the gas of some of the cast and crew who came out because like I'm in northern Indiana and I hired a lot of people from southern Indiana. So I'm like, it's a 3-hour drive. So of course I'll help you out here. But, and I tried to help out the main cast too. If, like based on how many days they came, I'm like, I'll give you a little something for driving out here every day. But nobody really got paid to do the movie. Everybody was a volunteer, but I did try to help people out if they were there for multiple days or if they came out from, a significant distance, like from Indianapolis to northern Indiana. So all of that added up to about $6,000. So pretty easy. Like I've been pretty good about saving up money and I lived at home with my parents for that time being. So I didn't really have any bills. So they're like, not a big deal. And like I said, I was good at saving up money. So I just paid for things as I went. Like I honestly, I don't even think I used any of my savings. I'm just like, I'm just going to spend whatever. I'm just going to work a lot and whatever I make, I'm just going to put it all towards the movie. So I did that for that time up until, it came for post-production. And post-production was a little bit of a nightmare. I'm not going to lie about that. One thing I want to say about if you're going to be making movies like this, you really need to be patient. Like it's going to take way longer than you think to get this thing done. So for example, I started shooting my movie in 2017. I didn't release it till 2020. It took me like almost 3 years to edit this movie. I went through the whole editing process. I edited it myself, of course. I was already editing all my own projects, so doing this wasn't any different. I had already edited a couple feature films, so I was pretty comfortable with that in general. So not a big deal there. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. I think my first cut of the movie was like 2.5 hours or something crazy. So I'm like, I got to make some cuts here. So I got it down to like 2 hours. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to hire a colorist and a sound design person, sound mixer. Both of those didn't work out great. I ended up recoloring the entire movie, and then I ended up sound mixing the entire movie myself. And, that ended up taking me 2 years to do. So, I mean, just is what it is, So I don't want to bore you with all the details because, I mean, it's literally just me sitting here at a desk like this, just burning the midnight candle until I just got it to be as presentable as I could make it. As far as like when the movie was done is when I just kind of gave up. I'm like, I can't do any better, which is kind of frustrating to me now. I'm actually very afraid to watch the movie again right now, just because I know with the skills that I have now, especially since I became more of a professional editor, I'm like, I could just like re-edit this entire thing and make it way better than it ever was. But the movie is what it is. Once the project's done, it's done. I don't go back. I don't, I'm sure I would wish for things, but that's just, I always tell people I made the best movie that I possibly could at the time that I made it. And that's what I say pretty much about every single project that I've ever done. It's the best thing that I could have possibly made at the time that I made it. I don't even think about it anymore, if I'm being honest. I do need to go back and rewatch it at some point just because I'm curious and I just want to think about the choices that I made and just like what I would have done better next time. Probably going to do that at some point. Maybe I'll do that. That might be a fun video just to make and react to at some point, but I don't know. We'll see. But let's talk about, so that was post-production. Post-production didn't cost me too much. I spent like $900 on the color grade, and then I would buy like stock music. Like I had an Artlist subscription that I used. I had a Storyblocks subscription that I used at some point. And then I would just buy things here and there, like website, domains, stuff like that. Like it didn't really cost me that much. And a large part of my budget too was my merch, which I guess I didn't really have to do merch. It probably would have saved me a lot of headaches if I didn't do that, but it is what it is. So like $3,000 of the $15,000 that I put into the movie really came from the merch that I had to make that I tried to sell immediately. So it was probably more like $12,000 if we're really thinking about it. So if you're counting the Blu-rays and all that, like it's probably like less than $12,000 if you just take out the merch and the Blu-rays and, everything I didn't really need to do. And I also did a theatrical release for the movie. So I bought hard drives, I shipped posters, hard drives, and I got software to make the DCPs and all that. If I would have just forgone all that, this movie would have cost me like 10 grand at most. So you can absolutely make a movie for under $10,000. I think I can make a movie now, probably closer to 5 if I really tried, which would definitely be a recommendation I have for people. Like if you can make like a found footage movie, which is why I want to make a found footage movie, I could probably make a decent found footage movie for under 5 grand right now. I would 100% do it if I could find the right idea, but I've yet to do that. So, but I digress. So let's talk about distribution a little bit. So I thought about trying to, I wanted to do the theatrical release because I'd worked for a movie theater and they're like, you can play your movie here if you want and you can make all the money from it. We won't take a cut, nothing. I'm like, man, nobody's ever going to get that deal ever. I don't have to rent the theaters, nothing. They're like, you've shown your loyalty with our theater working here. I had worked there for like 10 years at that point. They're like, just play your movie. It's fine. They're like, it's cute. Do whatever you want. I'm like, okay. So I made that happen. I wasn't going to do it, but I made it happen. Like I remember I had a friend of mine, Mitch, who was a manager at one of the other theaters. He's like, you should try and do this. They'll let you do it. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if it's really worth the hassle. So then I started pitching it around and then everybody from the corporate office started getting excited about it. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'll do it. And then I did it and I made like $2 grand doing that. But I ended up getting none of the money because COVID hit and the theater chain went out of business. And with the bankruptcy and all that, they're like, you're not getting any of this money. I think I got like $200, $250 out of the $2,000 that they owed me. RIP. I guess I'm never going to see that money. So honestly, I'd actually be over 50% of my budget right now if it wasn't for that, as far as like the money I would have made back. So I've made back around like 6,500, I think, out of the 15,000. So I'd be like at 8,500 or so if I had gotten all that money back. But it's neither here or there. That's the business, baby, right? So I did my theatrical release in January of 2020. So right before COVID. So I had just missed the COVID, all that. I was able to get it in theaters. It played for 6 weeks in 10 different theaters throughout the Midwest and Florida. So that was really cool. I was happy that I was able to do that. It was definitely a flex for sure. But once that was done, I had to kind of figure out, like, what am I going to do with it from here? Like, I need to get it out into the world. I can't, the theater thing was cool. Like, I'm glad I was able to have that. I wanted to give my cast and crew that experience, obviously for myself too, but I wanted to give that to them. I wanted them to feel like movie stars. I wanted them to be able to brag like, hey, I had a movie that was in theaters. None of y'all have done that. I wanted to give that to them, and I'm glad I was able to do that. And that was kind of like, I know I can't pay you, but I'm going to make you feel like a movie star at least. But aside from that, the home video release, that was really important to me, and I knew I had to strategize that very carefully. So actually, about a year before I decided to do my own release, which was self-distribution, I had actually been approached by a distribution company. This company is just like, hey, we've taken some interest in your trailer, yada yada, and they're like, if you're interested, we'll do a deal with you. And I'm like, whoa, like somebody's interested in me, in my movie. Whoa, I must have done something really right. And I'm sure that's what most naive filmmakers like myself feel like when somebody's just like, hey, look what I got over here. I got something you want. I know you really want this, so I'm going to give it to you, but I'm going to make you sign a deal with the devil. And then that's pretty much what that would have been like if I would have pursued it with them. Like that, I don't think I'll ever do a deal with small distributors after I saw what they were offering. So, I mean, it was complete trash. They, like a big thing with distributors, especially when you're at the scale that I'm on, like their fees, like they don't say they charge anything up front, but they charge marketing fees, which are just some ridiculous thing that they don't even do. Like they count like, oh, we're going to put your movie link on Twitter and it's going to cost you $500 for us to do that kind of stuff. And they're like, okay, you're not going to make $1 until we make back X amount of dollars through these different fees that we have. And of course that number can always go up if they go to some stupid festival and all that. Like most of these distributors, it's a numbers game for them. They're going to group your movie, which is, like I understand the business model. They're looking at your movie like a product and they're trying to fit it in with a bunch of other products and they're trying to sell this package together to some platform or something. But the thing is that they're going to charge you some ridiculous number and you're never going to see $1 if you do that. So once I started looking into the details and all that, I decided one of the reasons why I decided to go the self-distribution route is because of Alex Ferrari, who runs the Indie Film Hustle podcast. He's very big on self-distribution as well. He does talk about some smaller distributors like Indie Rights. I haven't used Indie Rights myself, but it seems like everybody who works with them has a relatively positive experience with them. But I decided I was going to go a completely different route. And I'm like, I'm just going to do this on my own. Like I made this movie on my own. Why am I just going to give it away to somebody who doesn't give a shit about it? I need to go out and just do this. Like there's so many tools out here now for self-distribution. I'm like, I need to do this myself. Nobody else, nobody's going to care. That's something that like everybody says, nobody's going to care about your project as much as you're going to care about your project. And that's what I tell people now too, because I have 100% believe it. So I'm like, I've gone to war. So I'm just going to continue in the battle and we're just going to go the self-distribution route. So I started doing research about it and trying to figure out the paperwork aspect, like, just all this getting title insurance and yada, 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 E&O insurance. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And then I ended up settling like, all right, I'm going to start on Amazon Prime. So I put my movie on Amazon Prime in February of 2020. So it's been 4 years now since I've put out the movie. So I'm like, I'm going to put it on Amazon. and it did pretty good. That was the only platform I did, or I did Blu-ray sales at the same time. And I created my own OTT channel on Vimeo as well. Didn't really do any sales there, so it's not really worth mentioning. I think you really need to have an audience built up front before you do something like that. Like, it's totally a good method if you have the audience already. But for somebody like me just starting out, there was no way that was going to work. But the Amazon route worked pretty well. I bought some Facebook ads and I wasn't very good at it, but it was working. Like, I was doing, like, one day I made like $700 in sales, which was nuts. And there was a point where I was doing like $100 a day. So I'm like, something's working here. And then once those sales kind of died down, I'm like, okay, let's put it on Prime Video. Because that was back when you could still put your movie on the subscription part of Prime. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I started making even more money that way. I'm like, okay, people are watching this. Eventually I ended up getting like over 1 million watched minutes on my movie, which is like nuts. I didn't think I'd get 1 million views, 1 million minutes, 1 million whatever on anything ever that I've worked on. And I'm like, I was able to get these people, I think it had like 30,000 watches over the course of being on Prime, 30,000 watches. And so I got 30,000 people, even if they weren't different, 30,000 people pressed play and they watched 1 million minutes of my movie. I was pretty proud of that. I mean, that's nothing to bat an eye at, especially somebody like me. I don't have that many subscribers. I had less subscribers. I had like 200 subscribers on my YouTube channel when I put this movie out. And now I only have like 1,600 as I speak right now. Like, I don't have a big audience. So having 1 million minutes watched was pretty big for me. But eventually that obviously died out. So I had to figure out another method. Well, I had worked on getting my movie on Filmhub, and I listened, I think it was Alex Ferrari's podcast where he had the CEO of Filmhub on there, and I was listening to him. I'm like, okay, I guess I need to figure this out. And Filmhub was kind of the perfect platform for me at the time because I was a broke filmmaker. I didn't have money to put my movie up on distributor. If any of you are like as old as I am and remember Distributor or any of those other aggregators that were asking for like $500 to $1,000 per platform, I didn't have the money for that. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense for me. Filmhub was like the perfect thing at the perfect time for me. And it still is in some degrees. Like, it's kind of gone downhill a little bit in depending on how you look at it, which I'm going to talk about that in a future video here. But honestly, it was a perfect platform for me. And it's still the perfect platform for a lot of filmmakers who are making low budget or no budget films like I am. So I put it on Filmhub and it got on a couple of platforms, but it wasn't really doing well. So I'm like, okay, it just is what it is. It's still doing okay on Amazon, but like, it wasn't doing like great. I'm like, okay, I think it's done, whatever. And then a couple years later, I got an email from Filmhub and they're like, hey, just so you know, if you do XYZ on your movie, we think it can make a lot of money. Which XYZ at the point was put chapter breaks on your movie, dummy. So AVOD platforms, which are advertisement video on demand platforms like Tubi or Vudu or anything like that. So they can take your movie because they won't put chapter breaks on your movie. You need to put chapter breaks on your movie so they know when to place an ad. And I felt like a major idiot. I feel like a major idiot right now because Tubi is the single biggest source of revenue for my movie right now. And I probably could have made a lot more right now if I had put chapter breaks on my movie. I know this isn't my Filmhub tutorial, but if you are trying to get on AVOD platforms and you are trying to get on Filmhub, put chapter breaks on your movie. Trust me. Like, you will get on AVOD platforms and then you will make a lot more money than you will on any other platform. Like, Tubi has been very helpful and it still continues to make me, like, over the past 3 months, it's made me like $300 a month, every single month. And this is on a movie that has been out for 4 years now. Like, it's unheard of that movies like mine make money in general. And the fact that it's making money 4 years after I released it consistently still, I think November was like my biggest month ever. I made like $600 just in November. That's absurd. Like, that doesn't happen to people like me. So it's absolutely crazy that, we have a place where we can put our movies on and still make money. So that's kind of a TLDR version of how I made my first movie. I'm happy to talk more specifics, and I probably will talk about more specifics in a future video, but I haven't got to talk about this a lot recently. I've done it in older videos, and a lot of the videos where I have talked about making this movie are unpublished now, so I thought it'd be worth speaking about again, and I'll probably have to make update videos like this now and again just for new people, just so, because I'm sure this video will get lost in the dust from years to come. But, I just wanted to share that experience, and I'd love to hear your experience. And I'm still trying to interview more filmmakers as I have time. That's something I want to do because I think it's important to learn from other people, especially as I would like to make another movie at some point when I find the right idea, which I do have the right idea, but the script I want to make is just too expensive for me. I think that's something I could probably make 10 years from now, but who knows if I can find the right idea for something else. But regardless, I'd love to hear about your experience. Definitely comment. I want to hear about your indie filmmaking experiences. Tell me, is there something else you want to hear from me about how I made my movie personally? Is there something you want to hear about the scripting or about production, about how I casted my actors? Anything, let me know in the comments. I appreciate all of you watching, listening, wherever you are consuming this video from. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.